is Carolyn Hinds, film critic and journalist, and today is one of my special interviews for KCrush American Magazine for the 2024 Sundance Film Festival. And I'm very happy to be joined by filmmaker Dongnan Chen to talk about her short film, 14 Paintings, which premiered at the festival. And I love this film because it was about something I didn't know about. I didn't know about Dafen Village, which is an area in Shenzhen, where it's basically an artist village. It's like an artist collective. And I was doing some research, and it was started by a businessman who's also an artist. And he's like, you know what, let me start this collective and this village to like produce paintings. And it was more like to reproduce famous painters like, you know, Van Gogh and Rodarte and all of these other painters. And then it kind of spiraled down from there. So your film touches on the commercialization of these paintings and the art feelings of the artist. But first of all, thank you so much, Dongnan, for joining me. I'm very happy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so this film, they're saying it's about the commercialization of the artwork. And the funny thing is, I know some of these paintings. Like I've seen these reproductions, and like back home, I'm from Barbados, so like back home, I would see like the artwork and everything, and I'd be like, and I, in the back of my head thinking, oh, I wonder who painted all of these reproductions of these famous paintings. And then in researching and then in seeing your film, I recognize some of the pieces. Like there's one like the water lily painting that's I think in a is in like a pub or a bar. It's like this really art place, but it's like this big huge water lily painting. And I'm like, I've seen that water lily painting before. And the very first painting that you show is it's called The Roaring Bull by let me pull it up because it's by The Roaring Bull by Zhang Xiaoyuan in 2021. And I've seen that painting on Instagram. Like I've seen people,
oh really?
I've seen like someone post about that painting. And the one that looks like the Van Gogh painting where he's like, this is not a Van Gogh replica. I've seen someone post about that painting on Instagram. And so I was like, okay, I know these. So it was interesting to see in the film and then to do like the research and the background of how like 5 million reproductions are made from this village. So what was it about this film? So like my first question is for you is, we're going to talk about the film, of course, but I want to ask you about becoming a filmmaker, because your style of documentary, I think, is very particular. Like you have a very particular way of viewing your subjects and the way you're telling your story. So what made you become a filmmaker first?
Oh, thank you. So it's actually pretty random. So I didn't really major in filmmaking in college, but I sort of got this internship while I was in the third year in college at China Central Television, English channel. And I was randomly being sent to the documentary program. And at that time, I actually don't know what documentary is. I'm so ashamed to say that, but it's like for people in China at that time, if you do not grow up in first-tier cities like Beijing or Shanghai, probably you're not really familiar with the concept of documentary films. So that's really a time when I started to know there's such an industry. But actually for documentaries at China Central Television, it's more like TV style documentaries. So there's a lot of DVDs on the shelf in that office of Chinese independent documentary films. I don't know why they have that, but I sort of was able to watch some of the very independent works of the Chinese filmmakers at that time. And the first documentary film I've watched is by the Chinese filmmaker Gu Tao. He does a lot of documentaries in China's northeastern area about ethnic minority people there. And I was feeling shocked. It's like I've never seen anything like that before. And it totally gives me a feeling, I call that like the glories of human, probably. It's just very different from drama films, very different from TV programs. And I felt very attracted. And my advisor at that time was Zhao Qi. He was the executive producer of Last Train Home. So he talked to me a lot about documentary films. So I decided to apply for documentary program at New York University. So that's how I got into it.
And so because of this first filmmaker, the first film that you watched was about the indigenous tribes in northeastern China, as you mentioned. I noticed when you said that, I was going to ask you about this, because like your films kind of do focus on the indigenous tribes. Like your first feature film, Singing in the Wilderness, is about the Miao tribe, which is in like northeastern China, like closer to like, I guess like closer to like Mongol.
Yeah.
Northwest. I'm pointing in the wrong direction, but yes. But yeah, but closer to the border, the northern part of the country. And then also your other documentary short, The Trail from Xinjian, is talking about, you know, the Uyghurs and like other minority tribes, and how like for a lot of the young people, especially the young men, they become pickpockets when they move, when they're brought further south. And like you're talking about how the isolation of these tribes kind of lends to almost exploitation by people, because in Singing in the Wilderness, it seems kind of innocuous at first, but then you realize that your film is really talking about how like people from like Beijing and Shanghai come into these areas and they want to modernize the people and the culture, and kind of erase their culture, you know, but they're saying we're doing it for your benefit, you know, we're doing it for you. But then it's like, oh, really? And like I think 14 Paintings kind of does the same thing, where it's like it's about modernizing the people and the culture and the economy, but it's really placing the local people at a disadvantage. So like, do you think that your way of telling stories and about focusing on these particular aspects of Chinese, I think not only just Chinese history, but also culture and politics, was influenced by this first director that you watched?
Actually, I don't know. I'm glad you point that out, but I actually didn't really, because yes, I did have done a lot of films about ethnic minority groups in China, not only for the Trail from Xinjian and Singing in the Wilderness. I've also done other films about ethnic minority groups in other areas. And I actually don't know why it sort of feels instinctual, like I was drawn to those areas. And so I actually didn't realize it was like impacted by the first films I watched. But I think it's just because like if you really grow up in the mainstream, like the Han ethnic society, the ideology is kind of very singular. So I was always interested in exploring more possibilities of living or ideas by people who live on the verge of the society. And I have been very interested in this tension between life on the border and life at the center, because it's never only about living on the border. For people in my films, they also have to struggle with this power from the central society and know how to deal with the relationship with people there. So that's something, yeah, I've been interested in, the freedom on the verge and also the difficult situations when you live on the verge.
Yeah, it's hard when you're from, like as you were saying, like from an ethnic minority, and then you immigrate and you move, even within like a country like China is like a massive landmass, and like when you move from one province to another, you're basically immigrating because you're moving from one culture to another. And like your film talks about, I think your films talk about a lot about how feeling like an outsider within your own country, you know, feeling like an outsider within the same place. You like within basically almost the same culture, you know. And like your film very, I think very smartly exposed, and like you're the way how your films develop, it starts out you start out thinking, oh, it's just about the paintings, for instance, and then you realize it's about more than the paintings. It's about the economy, you know, it's about culture, it's about, to me, a touch of classism, and it's a touch about how people are struggling, and for especially in this case with 14 Paintings, artists are struggling with the idea of who they are as artists, and then having to like sacrifice their artistic identity and integrity to reproduce these works for people who don't understand their art. You know, like there's one painter in particular, like there's a comment he made, and it's a very small thing, but like it really stuck with me, is it's the scene with the horse, the painting of the horse in the office, and like the quote that you put up before you show it, where it's like the painter's like, I like painting horses with their eyes half closed, but I'm always being requested to make them with their eyes wide open. And like that one quote tells me so much about not only that artist, but also how people perceive art. You know, people don't really want art from the artist's perspective. They want art from their own perspective, and the artist is just a tool. You know, so I think for your films, you kind of highlight like how society views people, and how we put our own preconceptions on others.
You know, what's interesting is like while we were screening at Park City, and I heard people talking to me like after watching the film, they started to notice about these decorative paintings in places, and they actually found like 3 to 4 horse paintings in Park City, and they all have their eyes wide open.
Right? Yeah, like when you go into the store, and like you wonder who paints these. I always wonder like who was the person that painted these? Because they're not like printed copies, they're actual oil paintings or water paintings or acrylic. And like someone created these things, and like you as a consumer, you have no idea about the artist. But the artist had to dedicate hours and hours of time and their own talent into creating this piece. And like then it gets hung up on a wall and kind of forgotten, and like and so for you, especially as a filmmaker, like what did you feel about that as you were making the film, and like how did you go about selecting the 14 paintings that you wanted to highlight?
Well, I think the uniqueness about Dafen Village is it's never about the painters who took the initiative to do their own paintings. Like from the very starting point, like you mentioned, when the businessman and also artist Huang Jiang, who first came to Dafen in 1989, I guess, from Hong Kong to find this little village in Shenzhen to start Dafen Village. It was created to be an artist district depending on orders. So no matter, so before it does replica paintings, it's of course like depending on orders, but now it's like when the West, the orders drop, and when China is turning its economy inward, they're thinking of this new way to rebrand this village in order to survive. So they want to do like original paintings to brand it as a creative landmark, but it's called original paintings. It still very much depends on what the customers like and what they like. So they analyze the trend of popularity, like what kind of paintings sells better, and that's how they create original paintings. And personally, like before I started do this film, I actually never realized there are so many decorative oil paintings in our lives. I was actually at the very beginning of our research. It was December 2020. How do I say that? 2022. So
2022, yeah.
So like when we started to do research, it was a time like when COVID broke out in China because the government just lifted the ban. So I just got positive like in the first week when I went to Dafen. So, and all the people got COVID. So you can't really interview people. So I quarantined myself in this hotel called the Vienna Hotel in China, which is kind of a big chain hotel in China. So I stayed in that room for 7 days. And the only human elements that's in my room is an oil painting of a classic European lady. So I was like staring at her for 7 days, and I sort of developed this, I don't know how to describe it, but an emotion, a feeling towards that painting. And after I walked out, I started to realize those paintings are just everywhere, in restaurants, in offices, in schools, in parks. And even in the film, you can see like nobody noticed the paintings. All the people are like giving their back to the paintings. But I'm glad in the film, we sort of let the audience in the cinema to face those paintings. So that's actually the starting point when I realized like this paintings does have a strong existence in our society. It almost forms a map. Like when you think about, because Dafen provides 80% of those paintings in China. So it's like almost forms a map that connects snippets of people's life in the society. And I think it's very valuable for us in this film to create an exhibition for these artworks that does not have the opportunity to enter museums or art galleries. Yeah.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you think like how prolific China is with regards to just this one aspect of art. Just these paintings from this one small village, because it's not even a very big village, it's a small village. And like in my research, it said at one point in time in the it's late 90s, early 2000s, they produced 60% of all oil paintings that were sold globally. And that's kind of crazy. Like when you think about the amount of hours and it was just, I think at that time it was like they had 10,000 painters. So you have 10,000 painters producing 60% of all paintings produced globally. That's insane when you think about it. But then it just made me think of like how talented these people are to find that amount of talent in that one location. I don't think you could find it anywhere else in the world, honestly, because like that's just a really concentrated level, and it's like super talented people when you look at the details and what they're able
Yes.
to do. That's just that concentration of talent is, I don't think you could find it anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, so actually for painters in Dafen, like really has people are like art school graduates, they're not. Like they came to Dafen Village, similar like people who came to phone factories in Shenzhen or other things, like they work on, I don't know how to say that in English, but it's like the factory line, like
Yeah.
when you make a phone. And in Dafen, they used to produce paintings in that way too. It's like if it's a piece of Van Gogh, you are responsible for this area, I'm responsible for that area. So it's like all the people working together on the same painting. That's how it can be produced so fast. And people work so diligent also because in the 90s, it's like golden opportunity for people from the rural areas who can come to the city of Shenzhen to make money. And also, I think a lot of people in Dafen, they choose to come here, not only because the painting business is so prosperous, also because they like painting since their childhood, but they also don't have the opportunity to go to art school for more training. So it's kind of like hobby combined with benefits. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned because you said it was like a factory line, in the way they produce the paintings. And I was going to ask you about that. That's one of the questions I sent you, where in the beginning of the film, there's this incessant repetitive noise that sounds, I was thinking it was a printing press. And I'm thinking that's how they produce the paintings, because it's like a machine, it's like one after the other after the other. And it's this incessant noise. So was that what that noise was supposed to represent, like the factory line of how they produce the paintings? Because I will admit, when before it stopped, I was thinking, I hope this noise stops, because it was getting to my head. But then I just kept thinking, I was thinking, imagine working in a factory, hearing that sound over and over and over. It would drive you nuts, but you have to keep saying because you have to produce the work.
Yeah. I would be very cautious to say that because, since they started to rebrand as a creative landmark, the painters are very sensitive about their past experience creating copy paintings. And they are actually they think that they felt ashamed about how they used to produce paintings in the factory line method. But the music, I think I wanted to create a sense of tension that you can feel in this nonstop, relentless, forever production process that they have to do over day and night for the paintings. And there's a passiveness in it, no matter it's copy or original. And but it's interesting, like what I mentioned before, it's like this time on Interdefen, I can feel like how people want to deny the copy painting period of time because they think that's sort of low quality and painting. But when they deny it, they're also denying what they have been devoted to probably for 20 years of their life before. So now everybody is trying to compete to become an original painter. And also the social hierarchy began to appear in Dafen because when you produce copy paintings, they sort of sold at a similar price. Yeah. But when you do original paintings, there's competition on who sold this painting for how much, like where this painting can be displayed, or if it's like a 1-star hotel, or if it can be a 5-star hotel, or it can rarely, I think there are few people who can get their painting into museums now. So also like whether you're a member of the city artist organization, or you can be a national like academy, art academy member. So there's just this very big anxiety of identity among the painters, like who they really are, and if they can survive in this art hierarchy for that. So I kind of felt like it's a very sensitive time because when they used to produce reproduction paintings, it's sort of like a game they created to survive in this already established capitalism system. Like they don't care about the authorities in the art world. They just find a way to play this game of reproduction to survive and to make money and to have a good life around it. But now when they deny it, they want to enter this art hierarchy themselves. and which they probably don't have the best qualifications to do that. And that's why we think it's important to have this exhibition to let the painters probably can also feel like their painting has great social impacts and it has meaning themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of sad that there is a hierarchy in it, because that's what happens when you have almost like an oversaturation of producers in one particular mode of art. For instance, like 10,000 people in one location, and like there is eventually going to become a hierarchy, especially if they're competing to then have their artwork shown in museums, hotels, you know, high-end restaurants. You know, it's all about the quality of the location itself, you know. And they'll be like, oh, I got to show my painting is in this huge humongous hotel, and then someone would say, well, I only got mine in a restaurant. But it's like, and there's a competition in that, and that's not what art is really, to me anyway. Art isn't really supposed to be about. But then that shows you how culture and commercialization influences every aspect of our life, you know. Like for these artists, they're producing artwork and they're making money for their families and for themselves, but they can't really enjoy that because they know that like there's almost feel, as you were saying, like they are feeling almost like they're a sellout. You know, they're a sellout of their own art, and they're a sellout of the industry itself. And so when you were and you get a very good sense of that in the quotes that you get from the artists that are shown, you know. And I think it's really important that when in this film, no one really speaks for the artist, that you have the quotes for the artist. And the way you did it is like when you go into our museum, you have the little placard at the side of the foot painting that tells you the information. And like those usually only have like the name of the artwork, the name of the artist, the year the artist was born, and the year the artwork was produced. But you kind of add that by adding context to it, by having them give a description and like their thoughts about their art and the art industry itself. So talk to me about selecting these 14 artists and getting them to be, I think they were very open in like the comments. I mean, a lot of the comments, you get a sense that they're kind of like disillusioned with the industry and they're feeling very tired. Like for you said, like some of them would have been doing this for like 20, 30 years, and they're like, is this all there is to it now?
Right. So we actually started by talking to the painters first. So we got the interviews first with like 50, 60 painters in Dafen Village, because at the beginning I didn't really decide on in what way do we want to do this film, because it's only because I also live in Shenzhen and I have always been interested in Dafen. But at the very beginning, I was thinking about making a film inside Dafen, not really outside. So we started by the interviews. But after my experience in that hotel, we sort of think it would be interesting to film outside of Dafen in this way. So we traced the paintings through talking to the painters, like where their paintings are and trying to collect. But actually, it's a pretty hard process. I would say 14 paintings is really a film with extensive research, but it was presented or shot in a very minimal way. So, but for the research time, the painters, you know, it's actually very different from artists. They would know where their paintings are, but for painters in Dafen, they don't really care where their paintings are. But because there's a huge amount of bases, you know, there can be countless paintings. We were able to trace 100, I think more than 100, but something like that, locations and paintings. And that's where we started our selection process. And I think we're more evaluating on whether there's tension in this relationship between the physical space and the painting. And also depends on practical reasons, like whether the location would allow us to film, because the filming permit is like the biggest thing for this film. And a lot of, I really wanted to film some luxury places, but it's still a pity. It's like all the 5-star hotels, they turn us down because they don't want people know their paintings are from Dafen, because it's gonna like lower their price or anything. So yeah, so in the end, for filming, we filmed I think around 25 paintings, but in editing we cut them down to 14.
Yeah, and for the paintings, I thought the painting choices were very interesting, as in like the locations that you selected, because they're in like regular places. One is in like an MRI lab, and I have MS, I get regular MRIs. And so like when you're focusing on the painting, but all I'm hearing is this very familiar incessant sound of the MRI machine going off and doing the clicking and the clicking and the clicking, and it was very loud. And the way you focus, I just that because for the film, what I thought you did was interesting was you made sure the audience had time to look at the paintings, you know, like really as if we're in a gallery observing them. And instead of moving around a gallery, like you're saying, no, this is a gallery, you have to focus on it. You have to focus on these paintings and focus on the environment that they're in. But that one really stuck to me because I'm very familiar with that setting, the MRI lab. But then there's also one like I guess in a garage where these young boys are like, I guess they're in a band or they're trying to start a band, and one of them is looking at the camera and you can see the curiosity, like, what is she doing here just staring at this painting? But like that happens a lot in the different settings, you know, where you have like just regular people living their life, like the guy singing karaoke while you're focusing on the painting. So talk to me about being in the environment of actually filming the locations, and like just like saying, okay, like telling the people, just go about your day, do whatever you're going to do. We're just going to point the camera at this painting.
Yeah, so first of all, like by picking those locations, we do really want them to be familiar places because we want people to feel like how common those paintings are, but also there needs to be like certain kind of uniqueness about it too. It can be like true daily life. So like when we go there, like first of all, before we go there, we were in contact with the locations first, and we talked to them about like if they know what's going to happen during the time of our shooting. Like there's a one about a Van Gogh painting. It's actually a hotel. So we asked them what kind of activities they might have in front of that wall during our filming time. And we picked this one event, which is a business meeting. We think that would be more interesting to film together with a Van Gogh wall. So that's pre-prep. And when we go there, we sort of just put the camera there. And people know we're filming because we post like filming notifications.
Right.
And also the camera is big. But we also try to stay on the side, not to constantly remind people like the camera is there. So I guess that's how it happens. So we have like a prediction about it before we go. Like we sort of know what event's gonna happen, and we know the people first, like the boss who's sitting in front of that painting. We know he's a businessman in real estate, but we also know he's also a fervent lover of singing. You know, he has his own album online. That song, he let people wrote that song for him. It's his song. He published it. So yeah, there could be little design elements before we go because we try to know the people before we go. But while we are on location, we post the camera there for 4 hours. That's the average time, I guess, and to just let it happen. And in the post, we try to not select the most dramatic events, because I think the most important thing for this film is like what you said. We want people to focus on the painting, like give you the patience, the time to really look at the paintings, which are often ignored, and to let the painting to be as obvious as the physical space. Yeah, so we wanted to be like sort of swing between humor and boredom, not the most dramatic events. Yeah.
But it's not dramatic, but they, like you said, they kind of swing between humor and boredom in very interesting ways. Like I know we're gonna have to wrap it soon, but one of the last questions that I have to ask kind of deals with that. Like there's 2 paintings in particular. There's one that's a giant mural and it's outside, and it's about this artist. He originally made the painting to show the people getting the PCR test, and this would have been done at the beginning of the first wave of the pandemic, where the government was trying to really get people to make sure they get tested so they have people. And then like when like the vaccines began to roll out, like he was told, go back, change this, show like the people getting vaccinations instead. And like that kind of gives you an idea of one, like how the artists are, like where people might not know who the painting is, but the person who commissioned them is the person that contacts them. But it also kind of shows you, gives you a glimpse in how the government is very cognizant of messaging and art being a message as to consumers, you know, and to the public, and saying, this is a very good way to make sure that we get a particular message across. So there's that. And it's kind of boredom in that, and it's humorous in the sense that while we are looking at this mural, there's this little girl sitting in the back of the car, and she's like just looking at the camera, like what's happening here? And like you're looking at her, and she's observant, and she's cute, she's all curious, but you're looking at the painting. And then there's another one in a museum where I thought it was interesting. Again, this is another one talking about how like the politics kind of plays into the art for the artist, where the artist she talks about her family being rich before the Cultural Revolution and then like becoming impoverished afterwards, and like that's a very significant point in time for her life because her life changed dramatically, and she painted this moment. And while you see the quotes from her, and then you see the painting, which is kind of like this symbol of like this man leading like the revolution, whatever. And then you have the museum curators learning how to actually conduct the what's it say, the guests moving through the space. And I thought it was just such an interesting juxtaposition, you know, where you can show how politics really does play a part in the art. Because if you really listen to what the museum director is saying, she's telling them, you point up because you're trying to convey a particular message to the guests, and you point down because this painting has a different message to the one before. So talk about those. I thought those two were very interesting because to me, they're the ones that really show, like, again, political messaging in art, and how the artist feels one way about the painting, but the commissioner, in this case, the government or whoever, has a different idea of what the painting means.
Yes, I think that's like what you said, and for me, it also means like how this, because the mural painting of the promotion for COVID, it's like we call that promotional murals, which is very common. You can see that all through China, especially in cities, but also in rural areas. That's how the government deliver their message to the people. And that's like a big section of what the artists do in Dafen. That's the government is one of their biggest employers for that. And the interesting thing about those murals is like they change from time to time. You know, the wall in the mirrors in the city, they're like one painting from one time, but they're gonna be changed after a few months. And it's actually would be also interesting if you just focus on one mirror and just film it throughout the years. And I guess that tells you a lot about the policies, about how our country evolves throughout the time, like how time shifts, how the shifting of time can be reflected through the paintings, right? And yeah, and I think that that wall probably has already been changed into something else after we filmed, I guess so. Yeah, and I think the artist, he himself, he's probably not. For example, the one in the museum about the Siemens strike. We picked that because she has paintings in different locations, right? But after my interview with her, I really want to film this one in this museum about the strike against imperialism. But I think for her, she thinks that in a different way. She's very proud of that painting because it's in a official museum, and which is a very nice museum, and she's proud of it. So I'm not sure, like, she's really aware of this conflicts that she escaped. In order to escape her family fate, she came to Dafen to find a new life, but she's really painting this for the people who has really given them the painful history in that village. I don't think that has really occurred to the painter. So yeah, it's and also for this film, it cannot give me an interesting feeling because we're trying to give this very cold feeling. Even the camera is like we pose the camera in a way like we don't care if people fall out of the frame. It's really about the paintings. So I think in a way it from the feedback I got from people really got different understanding of the film. And it has such an openness, like people interpret the scenes in their own different ways based on their original perceptions. And that's something that actually make me feel very satisfying about this film.
Yeah, that makes sense because art is subjective, you know. We all look at a painting and everyone gets something different from a painting. So it makes sense that for a film like this, that the audience, that each person, excuse me, that each person gets something different out of it, because you might look at a painting one day and you feel something very particular about it, and then the next day you look at it and you say, this is different, you know, you get something different from it. And so I know we're gonna wrap it now. So my last question: have you thought about possibly showing this film to an art school, or like maybe showing it to the artists in Dafen and what they think about it? Because I think it would be very interesting to get the perspective of our artists themselves about the film and about the particular pieces that are shown in it.
Yeah, I haven't found opportunities to show at art school, but yet, because we're just doing our first premieres. But I did have shown the film to the Dafen painters, and I got very polite and nice feedback, I guess. I think they said the film is interesting and lovely, but not very passionate feedback. I don't know why. Probably because like people are being very anxious nowadays. It's like probably this film is not gonna help a lot in the sales of their paintings in that way, because it's more like an artistic piece, which is you probably see those videos a lot in museums. So that's not as promotional as they have predicted, I guess. But I think they found the film interesting, but not very passionately about it.
Well, I think it's interesting, Nathan, because the film has made me curious. So, like, one of my dreams is to go to China. I'd love to go to like the Shanghai Film Festival there. And like I already made it in my head. If I ever get a chance to go to China, I'm gonna try to go to Dafen Village to go look at this place, because to me it seems really fascinating, you know, to go to a place and see all of these artists in one spot, and the things that you can do there and the talent that's there. So I would actually tell them, this is actually a very good promotional tool for the village. So so
I'm happy to hear that. I hope so, because I'm actually also looking still further, want to look for opportunities to see if possible we can expand this into an exhibition to get the Dafen painters and their paintings more involved in this. Yeah.
No, I think that'd be a great idea, actually. Like, just show it in different places and have the artists come and talk about their pieces and like their own reflections and purpose and feelings on the not only their own personal paintings, but also maybe on each other's, you know, kind of critique each other's work and like how they feel about it. So no, if you do that, it would be amazing. And I would also suggest you possibly show it at film festivals like the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival here in Toronto, because Toronto has a very big art scene, and I think it would go over well with the audiences here.
Okay, thank you. I'll try that.
Great. Thank you so much, Dongnan, and congratulations on the film. I honestly really enjoyed it and found it very curious.
Thank you so much.